All right, thank you all for joining us. You all should be muted and really appreciate you joining us today. I'm going to toss it over to our colleague Gabriella to get us started.
Thank you for joining us this morning. We will get started shortly. So I like for all attendees to please be muted. We will have time for questions later in our presentation. Please drop any questions you have in the chat. We will address them later. And we are being recorded in our presentation. Today we're going to break down why centering lived experience is crucial to our work. Excuse me. Then we'll focus on how you as a system partner can put this information into practice. I'm Gabriela Gabrian with the Lived Experience Advisory Board of Silicon Valley. And we'll have a great panel this morning leading this work. Karen Mestizo, Youth and Young Adult Initiative lead with the County of Santa Clara. Jackie Morales, Director of San Jose Housing. And Shelley Swan, Executive Director of Cary Division. Let's start by defining lived experience. Lived experience in this context can be defined as the representation and understanding of an individual's human experience of homelessness, choices and options, and how these factors influence the individual's perception of homelessness response system. Now let's focus on why centering lived experience is so crucial. No one understands what it's like to be homeless, like those of us who have lived through this experience. Lived experience helps to develop a deeper understanding of the conditions affecting populations currently experiencing homelessness. The solutions that are most appropriate for those impacted by the issue, and the potential of harmful and unattained consequences of the actions taken by the existing system on the people it aims to serve. By including the perspective of people who have experienced homelessness, services and programs are better set up for success. An organization will improve outcome by gaining a deeper understanding of the needs of people impacted by homelessness and housing instability. The perspectives of people with lived experience can help ensure that services are not traumatic, and it will be easier and more likely that an organization can achieve client buy-in when services are informed by lived experience. For example, for myself, I was chronically homeless, and on my last bout of homelessness, I was at a shelter that of course had certain regulations and curfews and responsibilities such as chores and certain meetings, and somehow I was just blessed enough to have my case manager be a new employee, maybe not molded yet, that was willing to write me late passes if I needed to go to the doctor to receive the medical care I needed at the time. I actually had an infection, pneumonia, bronchitis, just had my lung removed. My curfew was for 6 o'clock, and oftentimes I would go to AA meetings because I was pursuing sobriety and my chore was due. So during our meetings, she would ensure that I get a chore that I can do after 10 p.m. Then I could take my time. Coincidentally, my chore was the bathroom, and I became excellent at doing my chore. Bathroom was the hardest chore, but I was able to do it at my own pace. And every morning, when all the ladies would go in the bathroom, I was feeling, like, yes, this is a nice bathroom for everyone. And my social worker at that time, she listened to my needs and accommodated me, and the staff was excellent. It's like I picked them by hand by myself. We're going to invite our panel to share how you can put this information into practice. Starting with Jackie Morales, Director of San Jose Housing Department, who's shown great leadership in centering the perspective of lived experience in her work with the city.
Thank you. I'm just going to go ahead and jump in for the introduction and your experience on what it's like to be homeless in our county. And so for me, the very first thing I want to do is really give credit where credit is due, which is our work to integrate and lift the voices of people with lived experience comes from hearing exactly what we just heard. And from people asking us to align our work and to do our work given what we're hearing. And this is also consistent with our commitment to center equity and inclusion in the development of our housing programs and policies. So from my perspective, centering lived experience in our work means that we're creating a seat at the table for input and decision making. Sometimes we don't make the decision. The decision is made by our policymakers, which includes the city council. And so really what we're doing is including the recommendations. And again, hearing from, and I can see the chat as well, just acknowledging how powerful the lived experience Gabriella's story is, and sharing that. It can have a tremendous impact on our decision makers, because I think they often, or maybe just more broadly, often in the public sphere, we hear the negative stories of what people are. There's this imaginative person of who homeless people are that are living on our streets. So having real life experience really makes it a critical part of our work. So in terms of, how we do that and what it looks like, first of all, our leadership has to be willing to accept. I'm the director of the housing department. And so it was, it's easy if I'm saying, yes, we're going to do this. It's much harder if your leadership has resistance in creating this change. And so getting people on board is, obviously one of the first important and critical steps in moving it along. But I also feel like we have to create institutional support for people that we're asking to participate. So I get paid, I'm getting paid to participate in this panel right now. But often when we ask people with lived experience to participate, they're having to take their time and make an effort to participate and actually to educate us. And so we think in the city that it's really important that we provide stipends and any additional support that we can in order to ensure that people can fully come to the table and that there not be barriers to their participation. When I think about how we have, how this has actually transformed our work, I have several examples, which you can see on our slide. So first of all, our Housing and Community Development Commission, which is the citizens group that makes recommendations to the City Council about how we fund our homeless programs. We actually had somebody with lived experience come to our City Council and say to the mayor, we should have somebody on this commission. And in addition, the Housing Department had recommended we expanded the commission to include a voice of lived experience. And so that recommendation, and again, the support of people with lived experience saying this was important, led to that change. And so we now have a dedicated seat for someone with lived experience so that they can offer from the perspective that we just heard this morning or earlier before me, every time we have a proposal that comes in. And again, we provide a stipend for that seat, and we also provide training and support and a buddy in hopes of making that a positive experience. We also look to having lived experience in our homeless team, our homeless response team, whether it's members who have had family members that have lived experience, or it's a staff person that has lived experience. The team is comprised of a range of people with experience in order to, again, implement the programs that are more responsive to the needs of the people in our community. We also have quarterly meetings with external entities that the Housing Department really started as a result of our equity and inclusion work. And one of the stakeholders that we wanted represented were people with lived experience on homelessness. And we do have a very active group of people, and we provide stipends for those meetings. What the meetings are designed to do are to provide direction, feedback to the Housing Department regarding what are the issues and concerns, and then we come to the meeting with information that responds to people's concerns or issues that they're wanting more information on. And then lastly, the Housing Department is working on reimagining ourselves, coming up with a new mission statement, new value statement. And as part of that work, and again, centered around equity and inclusion, we've said we really need to have stakeholders and representation from the community in which we serve. And again, because the Housing Department ending homelessness is part of our critical work, we have people with lived experience who are working with our staff to rethink about what does the Housing Department do, what's our mission, how should we be approaching our work. And so that's a body of work that's going to take, over a year for us to complete. And so how can organizations begin? One of the things I think is partnering up with people who already have lived experience groups that are organized. So I'm going to make a plug for Destination Home because they do have the LEAB, which is a lived experience board. But I also know Sacred Heart has a lived experience group. And I know that for many of us, we have people and advocates with lived experience who are pushing us to do more. And so all of these are places where we can start. Other ways that we have integrated the work is we're now thinking about how do we, through our RFQ process, have developments include people with lived experience before we actually fund developments. And we had a very successful partnership with Destination Home and LEAB in reviewing our interim housing site at Lot E, the Guadalupe site. And if you were to visit that site, you would see that it is much different than our other sites in terms of how the look and feel of the site. So I think it's really important that you plan and think about a strategy and approach. And there are many groups already organized, so it shouldn't stop you. It should be a starting point. And as we are as public in the public side, required to reach out to all of our stakeholders, it is important to remember that people's lived experience are just as important as any other stakeholder that we work with at each time. So with that, I will end my presentation. Thank you. Oh, I guess here's some additional slides. So you can see the difference between our Evans Lane, which was done without lived experience. And you can see on the right, the difference between having lived experience, people provide feedback on the design of the structure. So you can see we added color, we have bathrooms, although all of them have bathrooms. There was an attempt in this site to remove the bathrooms, but because of the advocacy of both lived experience and the housing department, we kept the bathrooms. And so those were critical additions to the site. And again, you can see the site is so much more welcoming and warm than our original site.
Hey everyone, thank you, Jackie, for sharing a lot of those learnings. My name's Karen Mestizo. I am with the County of Santa Clara, as Gabriella introduced me. I'm the Youth and Young Adult Initiatives lead, a lot of the work that I am involved in that you'll hear me talk about is the Youth Action Board, the Youth and Young Houselessness Demonstration, Youth and Young Adult Houselessness Demonstration Project, as well as the Community Coordinated Plan. So, to really address the first question, what does centering lived experience look like? It's really providing tools. So some of what you see on that first bullet point, those are the tools that you need to really provide people with lived experience and your staff to be able to do this work. And so what do I mean by that? Some of the context. So, when involving people with lived experience, and for example, this is what I advocate and work to implement with our Youth Action Board and anyone else who is also a lived experience person working on projects directly with us, is really providing what is the context behind this project, right? Why are we doing this? And what is the information that we need to provide them on why they should even be here, right? Why is it important for their voice to be a part of the work? And sometimes they'll already know, but other times it's also just, building that relationship with them and, supporting them to really, if they feel comfortable to, inform the work through their lived experience or their communities, right? And Jackie already touched on this, but compensating people with lived experience for the work is the number one thing that folks should be thinking about if they're considering involving people of lived experience to inform their work. I think first and foremost, that's the most important part. I've seen on many occasions, organizations or groups, do this work with people with experience, but not compensate them. And while the intention is great, it's also like Jackie said, we're asking people to devote their time to, this work, where oftentimes, folks with lived experience have other obligations. They have their primary jobs, they have families, they have other things going on, possibly other barriers. Maybe they're still houseless or in a situation that involves like housing instability. So that labor is very important to compensate. Those are some key points and tools that on what it means to center people with experience, right? The tools and compensation. And how have I seen the work be transformed to end homelessness? in the county is really, you know, my personal experience with the Youth Action Board. So I was a former Youth Action Board member before my role with the county, and specifically with the Office of Supportive Housing and our continuum of care team. Um, uh, so, you know, so some of the ways that we, so I had that very awesome experience of like being a volunteer and then being staff too, right? So, you know, the Youth Action Board really guided the foundation of our community coordinated plan for youth homelessness. So really, what does that mean? What does that look like in terms of the foundation, right? So that means, you know, getting to prioritize like what are the objectives, what are the goals that, you know, we want to prioritize, what are the different projects that what are the projects that we wanted to prioritize. So for, you know, the YHDP, again, youth and young adult houselessness demonstration project, it's $12.4 million allocated to our community, our county, to really allocate that to a gap that that we see as a community where we need to invest in, right? So the county at the time, or the Office of Supportive Housing at the time, they went to the YAB to and the community as well, the community of stakeholders, which includes the YAB, to ask them like, what is it that we want to invest in? What kind of projects do we want to invest in? And when they went to the YAB said, you know, we think that this money needs to go to rapid rehousing and transitional housing programs. And so that's exactly what we did. So, you know, the CCP, so the Community Plan to End Youth and Young Adult Homelessness, and YHDP projects, they go hand in hand. So this opportunity to really work with youth and young adults of lived experience to inform projects, I think has been very valuable, because, you know, and it's really provided a way to for folks to really not just advise, but really mold the work. So just want to take a second, you know, for people to hear that, you know, they're not just advising, they're really molding the work. They're gaining experiences, they're gaining, you know, opportunities to, you know, build professional skills, and there's so much opportunity there. And I actually, this really goes into, you know, the third question, in engaging like people with experience in authentic ways, right? And engaging them authentically and building trusting relationships. So I was actually recruited by a community member. Many of you might already know him, but his name is Dante Lartigue. He is the CEO of Raising the Bar. He holds a lot of hats in the community, but I knew him as just Dante, somewhat, you know, a fellow like peer, a fellow sibling that worked at the hub under SSA. So it's a hub, it's a resource center for current foster youth and former foster youth. And we had met in, you know, each other in spaces that wasn't related to like, you know, building, wasn't related to the work necessarily, but other opportunities like, you know, college, or, you know, resources. And he reached out to me and he told me about the opportunity to be on the Youth Action Board, or actually not even be on the Youth Action Board, to create a Youth Action Board. And, you know, he told me about what YHTP was. He gave me the information, the context on how the county, or OSH, you know, had been trying to develop a Youth Action Board, and, you know, they had tried before. And so this was another opportunity to create to create a YAB to apply for the YHDP funds because they're federal dollars. So we, he told me about that opportunity and like what it could really lead to. And I really trusted him because I knew that he was a local like advocate, and I knew like his story, and there was just like without a doubt already a relationship there. And for me at the time, I was doing an internship, and I wasn't really sure like what was going to be next for me. But I knew that like, I had been working in tenant rights before, and I myself had received like, actually at the time I was actually receiving housing services through like SSA, and I had a lot of like feedback and thoughts about how like programs can do better, right? Especially when working with people that are going through it. And so he told me like this is an opportunity to really inform like the direction of like programs, whatever program it might be, right? And I was like, heck yeah, like I want to do this. I want to be a part of this. I want to learn. So just having that genuine, like that conversation with him meant a lot to me. And for him to tell me too that he saw something in me was very empowering for me. And so, I know that there might be like a lot of, I know that some folks on this panel or whoever watches this recording afterwards might be, not just working in like, houselessness or housing instability in this field, right? But maybe you're working in other organizations. And I would say that a lot of other issues like really intersect with houselessness. It's the foundation of, us being able to do a lot of other things. So I really encourage everyone from all fields, right, to really, look, if you're thinking about, working with people with this experience, really looking at, first and foremost, the funding for compensation. I would really discourage folks to start the work without compensating folks or even thinking about doing that. And while it's a great opportunity, right, I think it's still the least that we can do for folks. And then, like I said, understanding that like, each organization is different. There's different approaches. I've, even being on the staff side, I've consulted with other communities that have youth action boards, other youth groups that do this work on an action level. So, just understanding that each organization is going to be different in terms of, how you are approaching the work. Definitely, lean on other groups too, and see like, through their learnings, how you can approach it. And also, I've touched on this a lot, just, engaging and building trusting relationships with community. So on that note, I also wanted to loop back around to the second question. And Jackie had touched on this too, which I'm great. We've been working with the city of San Jose too, on the direct cash transfer program, and them involving people with lived experience in that RFP. And so and like from my own experience, we had created OSH at the time. It's so funny because at the time I was a volunteer, but OSH worked closely with the Youth Action Board to build out their RFP. And I see like, some other folks on this call, on this call that were also a part of the RFP. So really like that really frames the direction of like where the program goes. And like identifies some of those gaps on that people haven't thought about before, who haven't been directly impacted by this kind of work. that also included the evaluations, and yeah, so it was, and now we're at that point of, like, the Youth Action Board is at that point now, building or already having built those relationships with our with the grantees, to really, be in the loop about, how their program is going, being involved in the continuous quality improvement of those programs, as well as, they had informed them on, on what does it mean to hire folks onto the positions that are being funded by this program money. So, and how can you recruit people with experience for those positions as well, because that's also very important. People want, are more likely to be involved in the program and want to talk to you if they know that you're also, like, a sibling or someone that, they know you've gone through it too. So yeah, that's, I hope some of these learnings are tangible for you all, and if anybody wants to talk or starts their own, like, lived experience board in whatever work you're doing, that you see some of the folks here, to lean on, as well for that. So, yeah, thank you, and I'll pass it to Shelley.
Thank you, Karen. Hi, everybody. So my internet is cutting in and out, and when I turn off my camera, it seems to help. So I'm just going to turn it on to say hello really quickly, and then I'm going to turn it back off. Hello, everybody. And if at any time it cuts out, maybe somebody could put in the chat. I'm working from home today, so it's not as strong as it is when I'm in the office. Anyways, thank you so much, Karen and Jackie, for sharing, and Gabriella for moderating it. Beautiful story. What I'm going to focus on now is where can other organizations begin? I'm the executive director of Carry the Vision, and we're based in Gilroy. We provide classes, however, at Elmwood, life skills classes at Elmwood Correctional Facility for about 7 years now. And we also provide South County with navigation, resource support, and peer navigation. And we are also about to launch a social enterprise here in South County. So a lot of this is new to us. So I'm going to speak to Carry the Vision's experience around how we can begin. So this means that I'm not speaking to this is the right way or wrong way. I'm just going to speak to how Carry the Vision has applied it, and areas that we see possibility in, the challenges that we faced, and kind of what our ask is to the greater community. So the first thing that I would say to where can other organizations begin is to first arrange conditions for an internal transformation. And what I mean by that is not just organizationally, but individually, starting from board to leadership, to everybody. Because I believe that in order to really, be open to what the need is, or receptive to re-examining what those barriers are, we have to be open to what they are, like, internally. And without that, I feel like there's sometimes a missed opportunity. I also want to note that when we speak to this, there's we often use language of there's work life, and then there's personal life or family life. And I just want to kind of acknowledge that from my perspective, there's one life. So I'm not at work part of my life or home part of life. There's just one. And so how do we arrange conditions for ourselves and for our staff to be supported in their life? Because the challenges that we are all facing, are pretty big. So how do we arrange conditions for each of us to be supported in that? If we are asking for the community for transformation, we have to be willing to do the transformation for ourselves. So what we're asking for the community to do, I believe that we also have to be willing to do that for ourselves. So one of the ways in which Carries a Vision attempts to do that is arrange conditions for our own internal self-discovery. So leadership, what we call, we're not big on titles here, but what we call line staff or whoever have the boots on the ground. How do we arrange support that's ongoing? So those that are working directly with people, when we speak to like lived experience, that the secondary trauma that people feel, how are we supporting those individuals in meeting that need, right? How do we address that challenge that people face? So one of the ways in which Carry the Vision is doing it is we offer ongoing self-discovery classes that all of us participate in. Who am I? What am I about? What is my role to play? What is my purpose? What are the barriers that I face? And how do we navigate those challenges together? We also then have a grief counselor that is at our office every Thursday that each of us can connect with, that can help us to navigate that. Because what we believe, again, is what we are asking the community to do, we have to do for ourselves. So if we're asking local government or county government or funders for support in specific areas, we have to be willing to be addressing that on an individual basis and organizationally. The steps to support individuals so they have the capacity to. So I believe that the greatest gift that we have here are the authentic gifts and talents that already reside. So I think we all can agree that there's not a shortage of solutions. We all have that. There's the gold mine, the treasure chest, whatever you want to call it. That is available to us, but we have to arrange conditions for those gifts and talents to be expressed. And how do we do that? Well, kind of just how I outlined a minute ago, that we have to create a safe space within our own organization to be able to do that. So if the expectation is that, for example, case managers have 20 people on their caseload, and 20 people have, 4 family members that come with that. How is that possible for that one case manager to really extract those gifts and talents out of that one individual? So we have to arrange things to where there is enough space for each case manager to be able to support those unique individual needs, because it's not a one size fits all. So in order to do that, we have to be honest and transparent with our funders about what we need. And I think there's sometimes a fear to, I'll speak to myself, that when, as an executive director, when we're putting grant proposals together, that we know that it's competitive. And we want to be able to provide the resources for our community. So sometimes, I will put in more than what we can do. And the impact of that hurts the staff. It hurts then their families. And so I feel like one of the commitments that we're working on is being more truthful about what nonprofits really need. We need the capacity to be able to provide these things, to provide a not one size fits all approach for people. And how do we do that? Well, we need to have the space to be able to offer that. So the expectation to have 15 or 20 people on your caseload is not realistic. And I'm just going to speak for us at Carry the Vision. It's not. And I wish there was more of a space for nonprofits to speak to that. And again, I'm only speaking from my experience in Gilroy, where there is limited resources here. And how we can come together more and ask more for what we need, that aligns with the pay that, you know, we can define as a living wage, not maybe what the government defines as living wage, but what is actual living wage. So, and all the supports that come around with it. So with that, I think our time is coming to a close here. So I will end on that note. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley, for a masterly open-hearted conversation, and all my panelists. I really appreciate your time and your sharing with us in this conversation. Chelsea, I was wondering if we have any questions in the chat at this time.
We do. We have a few questions that have come in, and they might be appropriate, like round robin questions that a few of the panelists can chime in and respond to. The first one here, how can lived experience hires best be supported? Maybe Karen, you can get us kicked off with responding to that one.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think I can provide like my perspective from, you know, being hired at the county. You know, there's, you know, for me, it's been really helpful for me for like my manager and like my team to be very flexible. And also like understanding that, I mean, like, you know, to what Shelley said, like work life and your personal life, like they're not two separate lives that you're living. It's one. Things happen during the day. Like yesterday, I just was going through it in the morning. I didn't realize it at the time. I didn't realize it at the time that, you know, what I was experiencing was, you know, was like was burnout, was a crisis. And I'm really open about that, and I love to talk about like mental health too, because I think that it should be, you know, more normalized in spaces, because it encourages other to know that, like, you know, people are not alone in what they're going through. So I'm not shy to share about that. But yeah, yesterday I had to take a mental health day, and the fact that, you know, my manager is very flexible with, you know, with just understanding, and I don't even have to give her those details. It's just like, you know, okay, you know, I told her, I was like, hey, I think I need to take the morning off, like take the day. And I was like, okay, bet. And so, and you know, I always push myself to show up. And so even me saying, like, you know, pushing myself to show up, you know, in the afternoon, and, you know, her knowing that, like, you know, it's okay to take time off. So like that empathy, that flexibility, that trust, is super important. In supporting me specifically. So I can share that through my own experience. I don't know if the other panelists have anything else to add.
Karen, thank you for sharing that. Something that comes to my mind along those lines is being on time. So we have like these like a system or structure that someone made up, I don't know, a couple hundred years ago, maybe, that said you had to be at work on time at, 9 o'clock. And it was designed because, well, maybe I won't say 200 years ago, we didn't have cars then, but, some people, transportation is a barrier, right? So maybe the question is how can we agree upon communicating the time that we're able to be at work? And then redefining, that internal structure, right? The world says we got to be at work on time. And if we're not at work on time, then we're written up or we're fired or there's a consequence. And I think things like that are for a lot of people where your life, was arranged to support that, right? It's different when your life was not, where the system did not arrange things to support that. So I think we have to be willing to reevaluate those internal systems and structures that were invented by someone somewhere, I don't know who, but I think it's time that we kind of re-examine what that means and being flexible around that.
Thank you both. We have another question here, a few more minutes to get to them. How can we ensure that individuals with lived experience of homelessness are not tokenized and their input is genuinely valued and acted upon? Any one of our panelists want to start in response to that question?
Well, I'll just start by saying, even the housing, from the city of San Jose, we created one position on the Housing Commission. And I think we need to consider adding more positions that are there, because to say that one voice can represent one community feels like we're not doing enough, given how important this issue is. The city has said it's the, either the number 1 or 2 issue that the city is facing. And so that means we have to have more voices so that people aren't tokenized.
Yeah, for me, the biggest thing is professional development. And like I said earlier, it's like giving people those tools to know like how to engage in the work. And so that you're clearly like kind of communicating those expectations, or like not expectations, but yeah, providing them with to make them feel empowered and comfortable to speak, and so, and also following through like on our end, and making sure that like when you're communicating, like that you're not just like leaving things where they're at, because like I think following through is the most important thing. And what I really what I really want for us to keep doing like at the county too is like, yeah, continuing that transparency and seeing and following through towards, what's going on with this project and giving updates. We give we're starting to give regular updates on COC projects, or any projects that like the YAB is involved in, that we're directly like, in control of, and also making sure that we're communicating that with our partners too, like that want to work with the Youth Action Board. So, some other folks might not be where in where we're at in terms of like what we have learned. So making sure that you show up as an ally in that sense, when other folks are wanting to partner with the YAB. So there's a lot, and it's also ongoing. So I don't have like a one size fits all kind of a thing. I think just being very intentional about like how you're working with folks, is really important. Yeah, I hope that helps.
Actually, Karen, you just made me think of one thing that I just wanted to emphasize on what the comment you made about the support. Because it's often what I've seen when people bring in other people without providing the support, then if the person fails in the slot, then what happens is people will say, see, I tried and it didn't work. They're clearly not ready. I mean, all these excuses come up on why it was a bad decision. And so we, those of us who are doing the work need to do exactly what you said, provide enough of support. And as someone else said, if it's not working, figure out why it's not working. And maybe we need to change instead of asking the person to change. But we have to be vigilant in partnering and supporting so that failure is not an option. And if failure is an option at one point, then at least we have done everything. But I think it really takes a commitment.
Thank you, Jackie. And I just saw someone, say in the chat too, that accountability is important. And yeah, owning up to the mistakes, as an organization too, it's okay to say that you effed up, sorry. And people appreciate that. Because what you said, Jackie, we also don't want to make people that are involved in this work to make them feel like it's their fault. And I have been there many times as a volunteer. And I was always reassured, no, it's okay, this is all a work in progress. You're doing the best that you can do, and this is where we can do better. So yeah, that open dialogue is so important.
If I could add to that, first, Karen, effing up is totally underestimated. I think we need to celebrate that a little bit more. One thing on the tokenizing, while it's really good to celebrate, when people have, the transformation occurs, but we also need to have the same platform for those voices to be heard about the challenges, and to have real, honest conversations, and particularly in the government, the systems within the government, and how that is not about a person, but it's about the systems, and how we really need to have a wider platform for that. And then there was one other thing I was Karen, what was the last thing that you just said? I was gonna make a point on that.
I was talking about accountability, but I can't remember that.
Anyways, I think we have to just have the celebration platform, but we also need to include the challenges in that, and that it's not a personal attack on any particular person within the system, but we need to be able to call out those systematic challenges just as much as we want to celebrate the good things that happen. We need to have both.
Thank you all. What a rich dialogue, and great question, clearly. I think we have time for one more before we do a quick round robin of key takeaways, which are incredibly important, of course. What should be the guidelines about asking people with lived experience about their lived experience or their past? I'm sure, of course, this differs from person to person, but do any of our panelists want to share some perspective on this question?
Can you repeat the question again?
Sure. What should be the guidelines about asking people with lived experience about their lived experience or their past?
You don't do that. You don't do that. You can create, the space to I'm sorry. That's a great question, and you just don't do that. It should always be someone it being a space where we're talking about lived experience people. And I've had this happen to me recently, in a Bay Area wide meeting, where, we're talking about prevention and, I shared from a lived experience, like how, we can do better in X, Y, and Z. And then someone looked at me directly, or looked at me and the other people that, it was, they had mentioned that they're people with experience too. And they said like, how can we like, da, 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 da. And I just looked away because that was my boundary. I was not going to answer. And it's like me sharing my lived experience is not an invitation for anyone to be directly asking me about that or anyone else. So it's really about like creating the spaces to talk about the projects. And if it's like, for example, like if we're talking about like the Youth Action Board and we're talking about a project and like we're asking them, how can this project be made better? And people will share what they want to share, what they feel comfortable with. So I just, please don't ever ask anyone directly like about their lived experience.
Thank you. Gabriella, I know you want to chime in.
Yeah, thank you so much for your perspective, Karen. Unlike Karen, I'm an open book. I heal publicly. I have to be honest with myself. Like I believe Shelley spoke. When I'm honest with myself, I can be honest with anyone, anywhere. I can present myself exactly as I am, not as I wish I was. And I have found that in my own experience, when I do that, the response that I get is one that always puts me in awe of how the interaction is exactly what I needed for that stage of my life. But this is just my experience. So as you can see here demonstrated, when we serve people, we are all individuals. Although we're alike, we're all different. So it really matters from person to person. It's not like a one shirt fits all.
Thank you both. We are coming to the close of our time here today, but we want to make sure that everyone is left with the really valuable information that our panel is sharing today. So I'm going to ask our panel to do a quick 30-second round robin. If there is one thing that you want everyone to leave with today, what is it? And I'll start with Jackie.
I would say the one thing that I think is really important is just do it, right? Just stop with the excuse, just make it an opportunity to find lived experience and invite someone to the table and work through it. It's all good.
I would share, building genuine relationships. Like, I get it, work is work, but you could also just, relax a little bit. We can all just relax a little bit, and, create genuine relationships and have authentic conversations.
I would just say, I invite everybody to let go of how we think things should be and arrange conditions for new possibilities and new voices, and allow yourself to be really uncomfortable in those spaces and to bear witness to the incredible transformation that will happen through that.
I would challenge people in agencies where even if the agency doesn't welcome this, one person interactions and manner of how they operate can make enough of a difference. One person can change a person.
Thank you all so much for joining us today, and for the panelists for sharing this incredibly important information. You heard it loud and clear. Just start somewhere. You have some great guidance here. Just start somewhere and be the change within your organization. If you want some more information, there's a QR code that can be scanned here where you can be pointed directly to the Lived Experience Advisory Board of Silicon Valley and their information. We also have a couple of contacts here as well. But thank you so much for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing this work in practice. Have a great afternoon.
I thank you.